Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Fantasy First here at the High Stakes Sports Debates Network. My name is Tom Jude. I will be your host for today. Thank you all for stopping by. Time to get you guys all ready for your Sunday matchups with your start sits. Want to talk about some guys that you could potentially stream. So let's jump right in. Let's not waste each other's time. Quarterbacks. At this point, is Carson Palmer an every week start? He's putting up the touchdowns, baby. 10 touchdowns in his last 3 road starts. Going to play Pittsburgh. We know that secondary is trash. You're starting Carson Palmer. I also think Blake Bortles, on his way to being an every week starter. In a couple of my leagues, I think he's like rank 30. I don't know how your league does scoring. I know a lot of my leagues, he gets the bonuses for the 40-point plays, 40-yard plays, excuse me. I think Bortles is a solid start. I also believe Jay Cutler, believe it or not, crazy, right? Cutler, you probably got to deal with a pick, maybe 2, but if Alshon Jeffrey plays, that spells good for Jay Cutler. Also, I believe off the top of my dome, I think he's averaging something like 290 plus yards over his last 2 games, so you're getting yardage at a Cutler too, and I think that trend continues this weekend. I'm also starting Phillip Rivers. I understand that his talent is underwhelming. You got no Stevie Johnson, but you get... We saw what Antonio Gates did on Monday Night Football. I expect a lot of dual tight end packages. You got Darius Green. You've got, I just said his name, Gates. I think Keenan Allen's due for a bounce-back week. I think if you have Allen, you should start him, and we know Rodgers is going to put up the points. So I think the volume will be there for Phillip Rivers. Why is everybody saying to sit Eli Manning? I mean, that's kind of ridiculous to me. The man has done nothing but put up points. Yes, Odell Beckham's hamstrings bothering him, and yes, there's no Victor Cruz, but Shane Vereen really doing stuff well after the catch. I like Ruben Randall's potential. I think Beckham gets out there and plays. I think the Giants know how important this divisional game is, especially with Dallas next week. You can seriously take control of your division if you're the New York Giants. I'm starting Eli Manning, and I'm also starting the opposite quarterback. I believe Sam Bradford is starting to get a little bit more acclimated to this offense. Yes, he threw a couple ugly picks last week against the Saints, but you know what? He made up for it with 3 touchdown grabs. You know that this Giants team is hard to run against, especially if John Beeson plays. I really like Sam Bradford. Let's talk about some sits. Cam Newton at Seattle. Do I need to say any more? That's what I thought. I know Josh McCown has been so hot, and I want to start him, but that Denver defense is killing it. Just killing it. I got the Denver defense in 3 of my leagues. rank 22? 22? So when I look at that, I look at Josh McCown, those corners, man. Chris Harris, Aqib Talib, man. TJ Ward in the back. Just scary, man. If you've got better options, I am going to steer away from Josh McCown. Kirk Cousins, I'm also benching. That Jets secondary and that defense is for real. I don't think I need to go any more into that. And I think this goes without saying, but for all those people that are relying on Vic to do something with his feet, stop. It's over. He's done. I mean, it got so bad that Le'Veon Bell was this team's quarterback out of the Wildcat with D'Angelo Williams flanking. I'm also thinking that Ryan Tannehill, I get that this team is, and I'm sorry, I should have mentioned him in my starts. He's a start for me. I like Tannehill this week. I believe that it's going to be volume city for this guy. He might throw a couple picks, but I still like the talent around him. Not to mention Tennessee is allowing a lot of fantasy points. Last week was an aberration. We all know that the Bills didn't have Watkins or McCoy. When your number one receiver is Chris Hogan, yeah, you're going to do good. So my borderline guys, I'm going to start introducing some borderline. I'm just going to mention him. Fitzpatrick, ultimately I think you start him if you have to in deeper leagues, but I'm on the fringe about him. Also on the fringe about Alex Smith. And I would bench him potentially if Jamal Charles was healthy. I just think that Travis Kelce and Jeremy Maclin are going to get a lot of opportunities potentially, especially as they try to figure out if Charkandrick West or Nile Davis is who's going to carry the load. I can see those other dynamic pass catchers getting involved. And here's my borderline that's going to freak everybody out, and that's Andy Dalton. Listen, I think he's number one behind Devontae Freeman. But again, I think this Bills defense is going to play hard this week. I think if you can get to Andy Dalton and rattle him up, that's when we will start to see turnover city. He doesn't like to take hits. When he gets rattled back there, he starts making quick, just ill-advised decisions. And that's why I have him at borderline. Ultimately, I'm steering more towards siding with starting him, but ultimately I had to put him in my borderline section. Wide receivers, I'm starting Megatron. He's had 4 out of, should I call him Megatron? Calvin Johnson. He's had 4 out of the last 5 games he's played against Chicago. He scored 4 touchdowns. 4 of those games, out of those 5, he scored a touchdown. It's not Denver's secondary or Arizona's secondary or Seattle's secondary anymore, okay? This is a pretty good matchup. I think you roll Calvin out there with confidence. T.Y. Hilton with Andrew Luck back under center. And in a PPR, Hilton still put up 15 points last week with Hasselbeck. I think Andrew Luck finds him in the end zone this week. I'm also starting Kendall Wright against the Dolphins that look to have basically fallen off of a cliff. That defense that people hailed as potentially being dominant, they're nothing. So I'm starting Kendall Wright. I'm also starting Jarvis Landry. Again, these are all PPR. That's what this show gears towards. If you're not playing PPR, get with the program. I'm saying Allen Robinson, but I'm almost at a point now where I feel like I shouldn't be saying Allen Robinson. A-Rob has arrived, people. Get him in your lineups. Mike Wallace is a start for me in deeper formats. Charles Johnson's nicked up. We know that the Chiefs are giving up the most points to wide receivers right now, and Teddy's got to throw to somebody. So I think Mike Wallace is an interesting, sneaky start. And here's my interesting start of the week. I think if you stashed and drafted Martavis Bryant, go ahead, throw him out there, see what he does. Listen, Michael Vick is very inaccurate, but we know that the big body of Martavis Bryant will help Vick. Plus, we know Vick loves to just chuck the rock down the field. It was preseason, but we saw with Michael Vick under center that Martavis Bryant dominated Buffalo, just flat out dominated. So it's a gamble, but I probably should have him in my borderline section, but whatever. I'm sitting Pierre Garçon, Darrelle Revis, not much more needs to be said. Sitting Percy Harvin. Here are my borderline guys. Jordan Matthews, great talent, dynamic receiver, has all the physical traits. But there's a lot of options in this Eagle passing game now. Does he get the targets? And even if he does, will he hold on to them? Ultimately, I'm siding more towards starting Jordan Matthews this week, but always keep in mind those alligator hands are always on the horizon. Travis Benjamin's another guy who I think's up and coming, not an elite receiver. I think he's an up and coming, consistent wide receiver too, though. It's just a bad matchup this week. If Peyton can regain Peyton form, though, and put up the points, you might see Travis Benjamin get some volume. I'm siding more towards sitting Benjamin, but in deeper formats, I'd start him if I have to. Running backs. Running backs. Eddie Lacy, I start. Ivory, it's hard to keep him on the bench, even though that this is a tough matchup on paper against Washington. I start him. I'm also starting Frank Gore. I understand they did sign Ahmad Bradshaw, but we know that if this team gets near the goal line, that Gore is going to get the football. Oddly, though, he's not being targeted in the passing game, and that is a little worrisome, but life moves on. I'm also starting Dion Lewis in that same game. Dion Lewis is quite possibly the waiver wire pickup of the year behind Devontae Freeman, who I freaking hate, by the way. Had to face him in 4 leagues in the last 4 weeks in a row. What kind of BS luck is that? Whatever. I really like Dion Lewis to get about 5 targets. But it could be the LeGarrette Blount show. Every time the Patriots play the Colts, it always seems like it's Blount Force trauma time. I think both running backs are startable because I do believe LeGarrette Blount will punch one in. And I think that with Lewis, you're relying on targets. I'm sitting Jay Hill, all the talent in the world, tough matchup. Plus, I think this is more of a Gio Bernard game, too, when it's hard to run up the gut against Buffalo. Get a guy out in space, someone dynamic like Bernard. So I'm starting Giovanni Bernard this week. I'm sitting Rashad Jennings. This Eagles defense is surprisingly really good against the run, so I'm going to sit Jennings. Again, Jay Stu at Seattle. Seattle's got the number one run defense right now. Not the number one run defense, but they're giving up the fewest fantasy points to opposing running backs. I'm sitting Andre Ellington. He had one big run, but Arian said it. Chris Johnson's the lead dog, and I'm sitting Alfred Morris. Borderline, Melvin Gordon, not doing much with his feet, but he was targeted, I think, 7 times or had 7 catches. That spells good for PPR, especially in a game that could get out of hand pretty quickly. Amir Abdullah's in my borderline. I'm leaning more towards sitting him, but again, he's talented, and in deeper leagues, if you have to trot him out there, at least it's a decent matchup. I think Joique Bell might be on his way back, though, so watch out for that. And Carlos Hyde, again, had a decent day against the John Beeson-less Giants. Keep that in mind. I like what the Ravens are doing, except on offense. I mean, I like the Ravens' defense, like in terms of stopping the run. But I think that overall, I'm leaning towards starting Hyde, especially with Reggie Bush out. Just know that there's another chance for a 7 to 10 point dud, and you always have that potential with this 49ers offense. Tight ends, I'm starting Clay. I think he's right now the best target for Buffalo without Watkins. Eifert, I'm starting. Kelsey, I'm starting. Gary Barnidge, I think, is almost a must start. Larry Donnell, I'm starting. And I am starting Jimmy Graham, believe it or not. Spot streams. Kyle Rudolph is interesting. I think he gets into the end zone this week. Ladarius Green, I know that it's the Antonio Gates show, but Ladarius Green still got 5 catches for 50 yards and a PPR, 10 points from your tight ends, pretty solid. I'm starting Ladarius Green if I'm caught between a hard place and a rock. And I'm also starting Zach Ertz. The Giants have been struggling against tight ends. This could be the week to start Ertz. Defense streams. I like the Ravens. Anytime you play Colin Kaepernick, that's a good matchup. Believe it or not, I like the Titans' defense. We know that this offensive line of the Dolphins is pretty bad, so I'm totally okay with trotting them out there, hoping to get 7 to 10 points. I think the Vikings' defense is a great spot start, too, especially against a team that is lacking their best playmaker on offense, and I think the Eagles' defense is also a decent start at home on Monday night. So those were your starts and sits for your major players. Hope you got your streams in. If you have any questions, please comment down below. Also, check out Destination Dynasty. Just had a new episode. How do you build your Dynasty team? Check out the podcast on iTunes and on Stitcher, as well as HighStakesSportsDebates.wordpress.com. This was Fantasy First on High Stakes Sports Debates. We will get the debates going soon. Still trying to find people. So if you want to debate sports and you're passionate about it, send me an email or comment down below. And we will see you next time here on Fantasy First. High Stakes Sports Debates.